Whoa, I tried to synchronize with the piano right there. I think I think I made it. I don't know. Hello, my friends. We meet again, as that weird mimish band Creed would say. Welcome to another casual conversation with me, your friend Carlz. When I struggle with relying ideas that might be controversial, even more so in English. But anyways, so I don't know whatever people are in the world, and I don't know how they deal with representation. But being a Latino or Latinx or whatever you want to call it, a person from Latin America, to me is unavoidable to sort of recognize our own, how can you say, our own, like, it's not shortcomings, but our own suffering. Like, that's too much of a strong word. But, like, clearly, there are certain places in the world where you have less advantages. Latin America, Africa, India. So, and there are many spread out or like around the world. I don't want to generalize, but what is the point of this? The point of this is that throughout the world and history, many peoples, cultures, and everything has been subjected to oppression by the powerful. And this is one thing that it's really important to think when we think about Hollywood and these big movies. Which one of them today? I want to talk about one of the most critically acclaimed and beloved movies of the past year, Ryan Coogler's Sinners. And why am I doing this weird ass introduction? Because I think that, especially in products coming from Hollywood in the US, especially those products that are made, written, and like I don't know, headline. I don't know. I know if the studio heads are African Americans, but African Americans and racism in the US remains one of the subjects that are like prominent in their culture, in their talk. Like, it's amazing how probably never ended, right? It probably never will. And we've experienced some of that down here in Latin America as more diasporas and forced migrations have occurred from countries like Venezuela, right? But the point is, these products coming from the US, being led by African Americans, have necessarily this racial connotation. And there's a weird balance to strike in this sort of racial commentary and like non commentary sort of narratives. As an outsider, it's really hard to separate that. If I'm watching something that is clearly ingrained in African American culture, like, what do I know about it? You know, if you're not in the US, probably in the US you are as well, but you're always kind of like bombarded by these stories and news about racism and how it's still such a strong thing to but okay, the point is, I don't want to go too much on the racism tangent. The point is, movies have this multifaceted sort of expression, right? That they have ideas, they have arguments, they have, like, they are multifaceted products of art. And what I don't want, or what I sort of struggle with, is when you see something like this and you get completely limited by that. And this is a limitation that you sometimes even need to fight against. So if you go to watch Sinners, and it's so loaded with African American culture of, like, what, this is like the 40s or something, I don't remember exactly. It's really hard to lose that side, like that point of view, or like that filter So if you go, let's go right into the movie. The main thing about the movie, to me, the main thing that interested me was that it was a horror movie. It was a high profile horror movie, which we don't get too much nowadays. Even the 28 whatever later series, they are not as big as they used to be. So we have sometimes the substance, but like horror is still a niche subject or a niche um, genre above everything. So when you get the news of like a really well received horror movie from the director of Black Panther, none other, like as a horror fan, you kind of like raise your open your eyes, like okay, let me see this. And Sinners, going into Sinners with these two sort of expectations, the representation from African Americans and the horror movie, like okay, you go to watch Sinners, and turns out the first 60% of the movie, more than half of it, is just a setup. There's a lot of uh, like setting up the context, showing up the historical kind of like facts or setting, how they behaved. And with they, I'm not just saying the protagonist, but like society in general, how it was in that part of the U.S. during that time, the relationships they carried, the language they used. That's really important. The language they used, the beliefs they held, and surprisingly enough, this more than like 2/3 of the movie is quite realistic and on point, and it's especially devoid of any horror elements. This is important. Like if you're watching Sinners and you didn't hear before that it was a horror movie, for the first 2/3 of the movie, you you won't even suspect it's a horror movie. It just reads like a period piece, based on these two African American twins that escape Chicago and they try to begin their own business back in the town they grew up in, which is somewhere in southern south of the U.S. They try to open what they call a juke joint, which is kind of like a club only for African American people, right? And that's the story. And it's really well made. It's really well performed. It's really interesting how they show how society works when in like a mostly African American kind of like concentrated location, and it's pretty fair. Of course, you get completely absorbed by Michael B. Jordan, awesome performance as the twins, and it could even be like classic mafia type of movie, or those movies that people seem to love. I'm not a hater, but like many of these mafia movies are so alike, and they're like so trope heavy that I'm not necessarily a fan. I'm not a hater, but I'm not a fan. All the Goodfellas, Godfather, like you could put this one right there, just with the representation filter, as I said at the beginning, and you have some African American culture mixed in between. Okay, so till then, the movie is fine. It's fine. It's definitely not what I expected when I thought it was going to be a horror movie. But then, the last third of the movie, it becomes a horror movie, and vampires show up. Now, I'm gonna be as honest as you can be. The vampire part seems super generic, and it seems even a little bit disjointed out of the rest. Like, of course, you're immediately gonna think From Dusk Till Dawn, and what was the other movie I remember the other day when I was doing the Spanish version? Oh, the Tales of the Crypt. That concept of people on a closed space surviving, be it zombies, be it vampires, be it some kind of demons. In Tales from the Crypt, it was like a demon. They were like possessed. Evil Dead. What was it? I was gonna say the troglodytes, But I was thinking about the Cenobites, which is Hellraiser, and in Evil Dead they're called Deadites. See, just you begin to get confused by all of this. But that's the basic horror trope, like survivors inside a closed space surviving whatever it's outside. And in that sense, uh, it it shows a bit trope heavy and generic, and like, okay, when the movie ends, everything sorts of follow the patterns, the narrative patterns that you are used to. So, as I said at the beginning, I was so ready to apply this representation, African American culture filter to all of that. And with that in mind, the first thing I thought about was, are these vampires racist? That's probably the biggest question you can ask the horror part of Sinners. Are these vampires racist? And funny enough, them being the antagonist, they're not really racist. Like, at all. It's an interesting visual exercise. So the vampires in Sinners, and this commentary is gonna be kind of like spoiler filled, because basically you can't comment the full movie without it. But there's not really that much to spoil. Like, everything is so visual and everything is so sensation based that even if you kind of like relate, comment, describe the whole thing, it's not the same as watching it. But anyways, when the vampires appear in Sinners, it's so random. Like, they just appear. The guy just appears, like, out of nothing. And when they introduce them, it just so happens that the first people he converts end up belonging to the Ku Klux Klan. This is just a coincidence. He's not looking for it, you know. And for example, this is a very musical movie, and the vampires, for like, they sing old Irish songs. I think they're like Irish or from somewhere in Europe, and they are also culture and music heavy. It's so curious. So as you see this kind of like really trope heavy and kind of like generic, you start realizing or noticing the details. You notice the details, for example, of the vampires, and the vampires, not only they are not racist, but they are not really that bad. The vampires in Sinners, they, vampires are this weird thing that, just as zombies, they have been so overdone. They have been so many versions of it. Like, some of them are like, I don't know, what movie was that? Dracula 2000, when they were afraid of silver because Judas was the first vampire and he got paid in silver. Like, you get a bunch of lore vampire bullshit and like intermixed with everything. Okay, you can either go that road and make these lore vampires and have them have so much backstory, or make them into something else. And this is where, and you can see how I'm moving almost exclusively to the horror side. But anyways, this is where Sinners sort of begin to excel. The vampires are not only not racist, but they work in this kind of like symbiosis kind of thing. They don't want to, like, led by the leader, right? They don't want to eat people. So the movie is not necessarily gore filled. There's a lot of blood, but there's almost kind of like cartoonish B movie type blood. And to me, that also has a motive and a reason. But we'll get to that later. But there's no gore. There's no kind of like seduction, like the Dracula being like a seductive guy. You know what the main vampire promises? He promises balance. He promises equilibrium. He's like, join us, be part of our collective, like the Borg in Star Trek. And we all share this culture, like this unification. Now, if any of you have seen Pluribus, the latest series from the Breaking Bad creator, the Gilligan guy, like the island, Gilligan's Island. This is a subject that that series like really digs into the idea of a common collective and individuality. So again, we have the filter of discrimination and African Americans and the whole thing, right? How would you react to a proposal of losing your individuality for this collective? That's an interesting concept. And the main vampire guy, turns out he listens to one of the protagonist's music, Preacher Boy, who sings the blues. He sings the blues, and by the blues, he sort of evokes or like brings to life culture, basically. And this is one of the weirdest parts of the movie. Most people remember this scene because it's quite a unique scene. But in one scene, Preacher Boy starts singing the blues, and he starts to like summoning different moments of African American history through music and culture. So like a DJ appears out of the blue, then you have like African like shamans or something. Like you get the whole thing. And then you get reminded of the intro to the movie, the prologue movie. The Sinners start with a prologue that tells the story of how songwriters and musicians could kind of like create a time machine of sorts. Basically, it's a really poetic way to say that you have cultural expressions such as music, and they are loaded with culture. They are loaded with culture, thus becoming sort of like a time capsule. So, Preacher Boy singing the blues, necessarily implies his African descent, necessarily implies the future as well. You know, because there's no African American music, there's no hip hop or anything. Everything is connected. That is like one of the main subjects of the movie. Everything is connected through culture. So when Preacher Boy does this song, he's basically vomiting, like explosive vomiting African American culture like through his veins, and it's awesome. It's incredible. So the main vampire guy wants that, and this is a part of the movie where I really sort of struggle to understand. Like, he wants to absorb Preacher Boy because he's got the blues. He understood the blues, which is kind of like a really unique African American sort of concept. You know, the blues. You know, like you really need to feel the blues. It's like if you haven't lived through struggle, you can sing from the heart. You know, you can't possibly feel it. I guess that's why I love Linkin Park so much, and that's why emo culture was so prominent for us in the 20th century, and not necessarily being African Americans. Like, music gets you in that way when you get shared struggles through life. Like, we all, like, even here, even in this point, they were already under the weight of oppression of capitalism and people in power. If you're not a people in, like a person in power, you can always sing the blues, even if it's the blues, even if it's emo music, even if it is black metal. Like, you know the struggle of not being a person in power. I guess the only kind of people that can't sing the blues are like the top 10 most rich people in the world. Like, what the fuck does Elon Musk, or like what's his name, the guy from Amazon, what the fuck do they know about the blues? You know, that's why they do crazy shit, like going to that pedophile guy's island and shit. That's why they do weird shit, because they don't know the blues. In a way, we all do. We all, middle class, struggle proletariat people, we all know the blues. It may have different feelings, but anyways, back to Sinners. So the main vampire guy wants to assimilate Preacher Boy because he has this ability. He knows the blues. But that's weird because he knows the blues as well. And with the blues, I mean the struggle. He knows that as well. So he has this uh, weird position of not necessarily cruelty, but this lack of something. He needs Preacher Boy to sort of complement him somehow, if he managed to absorb him. So he absorbs so many people before that, and they all seem to come together in this one scene when they're singing this. I think, once again, I'm not sure, but I think it's some Irish folk song, and African Americans and the previous vampires, even the Ku Klux Klan, they are all singing it together. They all singing this song about struggle, and like, why does he want more? That is, in the horror side of the movie, that is the one part that I really don't get. Why did he need it? Why did he need him? I guess the most plausible explanation to that is that his real cruelty as a villain was portrayed there. He just wanted it. He just wanted to possess this sort of, how can you say it, like, because he also got African American culture by the other people he assimilated. Why did he want Preacher Boy so bad? Anyways, that aspect of the horror side of the movie can be just left like that. So it's not relevant in the end. Why did he want it? He just wanted him. The one thing that we can say for sure is that he ain't no racist. Like, he wasn't a racist. These vampires were poetic. They really were. They really were, and they really hold on to this notion of peace through assimilation, like the Borg did. It's not cruelty. It's not cruelty. You guys should. I hope everyone sees Pluribus as well. I don't think Pluribus during season 1 has developed this notion enough. It's just such an introductory thing, but it needs to go there. But jumping from the main guy and going to the other main guy, which is Preacher Boy, I think the balance goes those ways, right? Like, the vampire guy, okay, he's not a racist. We don't really know why he wants Preacher Boy, but we go back to Preacher Boy and we get to his story. It's not casualty, like, it's not casualty. That's a Linkin Park thing, but it's not a coincidence. That's a better word. It's not a coincidence that the movie begins and ends with Preacher Boy at church struggling for his music and being given the chance of letting go of music because it's a sin and embrace God. Of course, you have opposing forces of assimilation, right, between the vampire and the church. And I guess Preacher Boy knows that if he wants to sing the blues, he needs to embrace the struggle. You embrace the struggle. You gotta embrace it. There's no solution. There's no quick fix. There's only lies. So if he had joined the if he was assimilated to the vampire Borg, or to the church Borg, it is solely lies. If you're not in control of the means of production, you are always going to be part of the blues. And that's the struggle that Preacher Boy goes through. And if you notice, I stopped mentioning Michael B. Jordan during the horror part of the movie, because after that, Preacher Boy becomes the most interesting character. The twins just become like a classic vampire or action movie kind of like protagonist. So you see, in the end, the horror part, even though it's, I'm not gonna say generic, but I'm gonna say it's so trope filled, and like, it doesn't really feel that surprising. Like, the action is just okay. The gore as well. You know, that's the brilliance of it, and that's what you begin to notice. At least that's what I think. I think this movie was structured like that intentionally to make you have this, how can you say, like this visceral reaction to reality. And here's the thing at the end. I think, and this is a conclusion that I stand by. I think the main thing of Sinners is that Ryan Coogler, he knows the blues, right? He knows the blues, even though I don't know his background, but like he probably wasn't that harsh ghetto type, or like I don't know. Probably went to college and everything. He probably has more education than I do, and like he's probably like I don't know, but he knows the blues regardless. So what do you do when you can't sing the blues? What is your outlet? In the case of Ryan Coogler, is movies, is writing and directing. Like in my case, it's talking, and doing my best to convey my ideas. But anyways, if you can't sing the blues, you do the next best thing. If you're an artist, like Coogler is, you create this. How can you say? You can even sort of say this is the same of the blues. Like this is not a song, but this is art. And it's ironic to think that okay, the movie, as I said, starts with this prologue talking about the artists that are capable of bringing the past and the future together. Like, and which medium is more perfect for that than movies? You combine everything. Like, it's so explicit. That scene is so explicit that you don't even need to explain it. That's it. Imagine like if you could be transported by a song. Imagine if I can give you the images, I can give you the people, I can give you the culture. You know, Sinners is a blues song overload. Now, if this is wrong or bad, if this is better or worse than your regular blues song, it's not my place to say. But I'm a movie guy, right? That's what I love. So I end up being transported by it. And an advantage that the movie has that the song doesn't have is to give you all the perspectives. I give you 60% of a movie that it's all context. It's all cinematography. It's all how you say uh, what is the costume design. You know, it's all about ambience. I give you half, like I give you 60% of a movie about that, and then Coogler, as the author and artist, he gives you this coded message for the blues. Like if you're a horror fan and your mind works like that, and that's the way you express yourself. You know, you just do it. So that's why the horror part might be a little bit trope heavy, but this is just how he's expressing himself. It's like the chorus of a song. You know, it's the chorus of a song. It might be cheesy, it might be, I don't know, not the most original one, but it's the chorus of the song. It's where all the emotions come into light. And it works perfectly. So the first time me watching Sinners, and happens every time I watch a horror movie, I get overly critical about it. And like, yeah, I've seen this. Yeah, the gore is not that much. Yeah, you know, the action is just okay. The vampire lore. It happens to me in so many horror movies. But you still understand the work. And after you sit down with it and you hear it, you know, you understand the greatness of it. It's not easy to understand, but then this is full on spoilers. There's a post credit scene where one of the twins that had turned into a vampire comes to see Preacher Boy like 30 years later. He's old and he plays in like bars. He's like a blues legend, and the vampire, his cousin, yeah, they were cousins. He comes because he's immortal right now, right? And he tells Preacher Boy, "Can you still play the blues?" And Preacher Boy plays a song, and like he's taken over by the feelings of it. You can't get more meta than that, because as I said, this movie is a blues song, like explosion of a blues song with way more layers than like a song could ever have. But then it ends with a song, and the cousin, the vampire guy, he goes like, "You still have it," and Preacher Boy tells him like before everything went to shit, which is a code for before the movie turned into a horror movie. You know, pay attention. Before the movie turned into a horror movie, what did you think about that night? And the vampire goes like, "That was the best night of my life." Dude, that's genius. So he basically is saying the 60% of the movie that wasn't a horror movie, what do you think about it? It was the best day of my life. The day they came back home, they opened their business, short-lived as it was, where they recovered their relationships. It's a super nuanced ending, but it's just great. But anyways, let's round up this conversation. The first watch of Sinners, the first view of Sinners, it's a great movie because it's fun, it's fast paced, it's well acted. As I said, the first 60% of the movie is this incredible period piece, like filled with expressions and characters. It's so rich in identity, and the last 40% is in a first glance kind of like a trope heavy, kind of a generic vampire story. But the more it grows on you, the more you think about it, as you should, as you always should, the more you discover how Coogler uses his art to give you this. The blues. It's the blues, man. Emotions, struggle, drama. It's the blues. But the point is, as I begin with uh, talking about the filter and the coding of representation, racism, and like that filter that all of us, normal people not in control of the means of production, we all share it. How can this movie not be coded in that sort of discrimination type of like it can't because it's part of our identity, even if we aren't African Americans, even if we aren't not all the oppressed people share the same characteristics, except the one characteristic of being oppressed, you know. So if Ryan Coogler is going to create something, it can't be free of that. Is it the limit of his creation? Is it the only thing that this is about? No, it's not. And the fact that he chooses to not to make the main antagonist of the movie just straight up racist is genius. And he did that as well in Black Panther. I think Black Panther has this celebration motive, right? Black Panther, like one. I I I don't know why I keep forgetting Wakanda Forever, like, but it's right there, you know. Black Panther one has this celebration motive. Let's celebrate African culture, and by extension, African American culture. Let's celebrate it. Let's not think about the oppression. But then in Wakanda Forever, he's like, let's celebrate and let's think about our oppression. And he expands it. He throws a bone to us down here in Latin America. You know? So everything is coded in that. But it's not a reduction of whatever these works of art could be. It's not. But in the end, at the end of the day, what Sinners is one big, great expression of the blues. It allows us to understand it beyond us being African American or not, beyond the music. You know, it's a platform. It's a platform. You don't need to like the blues. You don't need to be African American. Ryan Coogler is using his art, movies, to give us this gift of understanding of the blues beyond the scope of its time frame. It's like a period, historical period. It's quote unquote race elements. So he uses these pinches of salt, like horror elements and all of these type of commentaries, to give us the gift of the blues. And hopefully we'll understand if we understand it, just as the vampire twin says at the end, it's gonna be the best night of our lives. I don't think Sinners was the best night of my life, but damn it, if I'm gonna keep demanding for horror movies to be unique, what is more unique than a horror movie that is less than half of it a horror movie? You know? So in the end, doesn't even matter. No, in the end, it's an awesome movie. Even if all it did was be the platform or allow you to think about the subtleties and layers it has, even in that case, it's just a fucking great movie, because not every movie can do that. Anyways, that was Sinners. Well, I hope everyone can, all of us on the struggling side of existence, can share on this awesome piece of art. And I hope Ryan Coogler keeps producing these awesome pieces of art. I wonder if those top 10 rich guys have any understanding of that. I think you can lose your contact to the blues. You can lose it, because you know these guys, like, well, not Elon Musk or Donald Trump, they were born into wealth. Like I think Jeff Bezos, he has claimed to, like, being a struggling artist or like struggling like businessman or whatever. You can lose the blues. You can totally lose it. You can totally lose it, because if you get the guts to become so powerful, become so rich, you know, if you embrace that, you lose your identity. You lose your access to the blues. You lost it. Same with fucking Bill Gates, you know. He's like, yeah, I give so much to charity and everything, like, blah, blah, blah. And when they ask him, like, about taxes, he was like, no, I'm better, like, handling my taxes than the government. Like, I'm a better philanthropist by myself. Like, I don't know, man. The fact that you have that amount of power and resources, you lost your mojo, man. You know. Then if you ask me how much should these rich guys give back to either regain the blues or to be again a part of us, perhaps 60-40 like this movie. I don't know. Can they regain the blues living on their private judge? Yeah, the big boat things and mansions.